I do believe that the importance of keeping the Charlie Kirk story alive cannot be overstated. I think it is imperative that we do. Something very interesting and funny actually happened just before he passed. He made this compilation video of about 6 or 7 content creators, and he featured people that he thought were, I guess, worthy adversaries in left politics. He had Cenk, he had Hassan, he had may have had Anna Kasparian. He had a few people that he threw in there, and then lo and behold, I show up, and I'm thinking, wait a second, I'm not that big of a deal. I appreciate the fact that Charlie recognized me and thought that he saw something there that to put in that video was necessary. Uh, but at the time, I was like, all right, well, it really is quality over quantity. And the one thing about our channel is that we have made it a point to not scurry this issue in any way, to not only go up to the line, but step over it. I lost my job. I've been visited by the police. We have been shadow banned. We are being followed. And I wouldn't change anything because I know that if there's something about this life that we live, and we're pretty sure we only get one crack at it, we're all going to die. So let's make sure that we actually live for something.
Yeah, let's stand on our principles, man. And I'm with you. I covered the Charlie Kirk assassination and really what became, I think, the story behind the story that, a lot of people wanted to talk about who's responsible for Charlie's death. And I would never shut the door on that topic. I don't trust any FBI narrative. Neither does most of my audience, for good reason. They're literal murderers. They put women and children on fire at Waco. They shot people at Ruby Ridge. They wiretapped Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Stokely Carmichael in COINTELPRO. But really the story behind the story was really raised by independent journalists like my favorite leftist, Max Blumenthal, when he had that expose talking about how much pressure, love Max, how much pressure the Zionist billionaire donor class pressed on Charlie in those last months and what really that could indicate. And with Charlie saying, I've lost faith in the pro-Israel cause, I have no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause, is a really major moment that Candace just put egg all over the face of the Zionists that were saying she was lying. No, Charlie Kirk went to his grave as the most ardent pro-Israel force in America. It just couldn't be more further from the truth. And I didn't know this until this came out. I was never really a big Charlie Kirk fan, but you could see in his episode in August, but the month before his death with Megyn Kelly, like he was starting to feel the frustration about this, people questioning his integrity, and he couldn't criticize Israel. It jumps off the video if you watch that today.
As soon as it happened, I believe that you should just believe what's in front of you at all times. And the second it happened, couple things. First, you had the real president of the United States come out and make a statement about how may his memory be a blessing within minutes, within minutes of his assassination. Then the only reason we knew that something was afoot is because it was amateur video in the audience that captured the killing. Somebody was filming it as it happened, and you could see what, the Jen and I have a theory that if there is a way that they took him out, it was through some type of a bomb in his lapel, and it exploded. That to me seems like a logical way based on the way that the blood splurted and where it came from. It could be wrong. But what we do know for certain is that they completely paved over the crime scene within hours. Nobody does that unless they're hiding something. And whatever they're hiding, it's something extremely sinister, and we know that. Jen doesn't think he's dead. I think he's dead. If Candace says that he's dead, he's probably dead. And if that is the case, then you take it a step further and say, well, why would they have to silence him? He was the most impactful voice in right politics for the 18 to 29 demographic. He is the reason Trump became president again.
Yeah, he's a major reason for it. All parties agree on that. And I'm with you. There's just so many abnormalities in that. The two that stand out to me that I just can't get over is the 30-06 round being stuck in his neck. I mean, you talk to marksmen. This is not my expertise, but I've found almost no one that can possibly believe that. And then they had it compared to the gun and they couldn't match it. Now, that's not to say that it couldn't have come from the gun they're saying, but what they did in the analysis was determine they couldn't make a match. And also George Zinn, the decoy that runs forward and says, I shot Charlie Kirk, and then he goes off to the police station. And then he said, the reason I did this was to help the real killer get away. He's let go after a child CP charge. And we never hear about it. It's just totally memory hold. It doesn't make sense to me at all.
And this is another example of, okay, if you don't understand the Patriot Act and what that represented and how that was on the books, and 9/11 clearly was an inside job because that's how they ended up getting the Patriot Act through. The Patriot Act is the surveillance state. That is what it became. And as a result, they know everything about everybody. So if you've got somebody, for example, who's got child porn in their background and has a history of being involved in very controversial things like 9/11, as George Zinn was, and all of a sudden out of the clear blue sky, he just happened to be in Salt Lake City, or in this case, Ogden, on that very day, at that very event, and happened to get involved. But it's just a coincidence. There's nothing to see here. Then you have the meeting in the Hamptons. Then you have the meeting at the White House. But Israel had nothing to do with this. What's great about Israel, if nothing else, what's great about the Zionist cause, if nothing else, it's all vanity. They absolutely are in love with their position of power, and they are convinced they can't lose it. So as a result, they're not very good, or they're not very subtle about protecting their position, which is why, if we figure out a way to unite along class lines and around this issue, we might be able to defeat them before they take our country down with them. That's my theory.
Yeah, I hope you're right, Peter. And I think that does represent a large portion of the Zionist cause, the Zionist lobby, that they've been so untouchable for so long. They have their talons so deeply sunk into both of America's political parties. But I really do think that some are sweating. I do think that some are shaking and acting more radically than they would. That's why you have them buying up CBS and the Paramount, and trying to make a bid to buy CNN to make it even more Zionized than it already is. And TikTok, one of the biggest used social media platforms by the Ellisons, used to try to kind of rein America back in. I do think that there is concern behind closed doors that some people in this cause, in this lobby, won't admit outright, but they are seeing that door close. Others, indeed, they don't think they're ever going to lose it. And yeah, we have to unite to, shed truth on this dark part of America's political system that's been, entrenched throughout both of our lifetimes. So
I think that the big issue here, more than any other, is what is the conscription to Israel? Where does it stem from? To me, it always goes back to JFK's assassination and the Samson option. If they feel that they are backed into a corner, they will unleash hell on earth with nuclear weapons. And that is always the threat of protection, which is we simply have to let them do whatever they want, because if we don't, they will use them. They have a death wish, and they will do what they have to do if it means the end of their cause. Now, is there a way to call their bluff without causing nuclear winter? I don't know, but I know for sure that if you think the American empire is not going to collapse as a result of this unholy alliance, you're just not paying attention. The de-dollarization is in full effect. And one of the reasons why libertarianism is becoming perhaps the most underrated ideology in the United States right now is because most people do not know how to live off the grid. And if you don't, you better learn how. You better learn how to farm. You better learn how to cook. You better learn some form of masonry. There is a lot of things that you should be learning. And we can always learn skills and be tangibly beneficial. But to the people that are, frankly, on the blue team in most cases, that live in the cities, that live in the coastlines, they are not ready for this. They have no idea how bad this is going to get once it hits the fan. But there are many nations around the country, led by China, that want to get out from under our boot. And if we do not break away from Israel, they will be able to successfully do it. So this is exactly why, when we say America first, this is what it's about. This is what that movement has to be. If it isn't, then look at Charlie Kirk, and need I say more? And remember, the one thing, the true similarity between Charlie's assassination and JFK's assassination is that it was done in full view of the public, and it was done on purpose. They want you to know that if you don't go along with us, see Exhibit A or Exhibit B, and you could be next.
Yeah, I mean, probably so. And I think you're exactly right when talking about the financial system, because what we have as a result of not only the Israel First War, but also the Ukraine war, the proxy war against Russia, shows that these BRICS countries are having it up to here with the U.S. hegemonic conquest across the world. And what is just kind of a loosely knit economic alliance right now could turn out to be, you know, something more like the Warsaw Pact, but even more like that, become a new financial superstructure that kind of creates a new reserve currency that gets adopted throughout the war, displaces the dollar. That is really at the core of what America First should be, as you said. And, you know, whether your plan to kind of counteract that is gold or Bitcoin or barter or alternative currencies, you know, whatever it is, that's something that Americans do need to learn more about. And I do worry about that too. It's something that libertarians have talked about a long time because of the threat of the central banks has imposed an inflation, which is really a hidden tax, as Milton Friedman called it, on the American citizenry. Because whenever they spend money, they're going to either borrow money, tax you later, or your posterity, which essentially they build shackles for, or inflate it through an unlegislated process determined by banker oligarchs. That's literally what they do. And that's why Americans pay more for food and fuel and raw materials, despite them saying, oh no, inflation is low. But what they really mean by that is, no, the dollar is still being debased. It's just being debased at a slightly slower rate than the fastest rate in human history over the last 5 years.
And this is why Trump is so dangerous, because he accelerates it to such a pace and with such bravado and bluster that you can't ignore it. You just can't. Whereas if you had somebody like a Biden or a Harris in charge at the wheel, so to speak, it would be managed so much better. This is why I've always said Democrats are more dangerous than Republicans, because they protect empire much better than Republicans do. When Republicans are in charge, you can see it from a mile away. With Trump, you could see it from, you know, a galaxy away. With the corporate liberal establishment, it's based on vibes. It's based on decorum. And when you base your ideology along those lines of everything's okay, the adults are in charge now, too many people go back to sleep, and then there's no fight. And so this is the fight that we're facing right now. How do we get forward? How do we continue to push this narrative forward? I do believe that we are going to have very difficult times for a lot of people. I don't have an affinity for crypto, even Bitcoin, for this reason. It's too environmentally damaging. I believe that the data centers, which have little to nothing to do with anything that could benefit people, AI is a tool of the rich and powerful. It's a tool of the military industrial complex. That's all it's really for anyway. And when you think about the people who are in charge, especially Alex Karp, who is Big Brother come to life, if there ever was one, I've never seen anything like this, where once it was decided that Silicon Valley was the new Wall Street, you put a bunch of non-empathetic, machine-like individuals in charge of everything. You had to know that things were not going to go well. And now we're seeing the ramifications as a result. How we get out of it, I'm not sure. But I would definitely say, from tangible wealth building perspective, silver is the working man's barter tool and should be used. Gold is something to store value. And I do believe that various forms of real estate is also very important. And I'm not just talking about single family homes. I'm talking about places for business, things that could be used. There's so many different ways that it could be utilized, but we don't do it. Nowhere near like what we could do if we wanted to. As I had said earlier, the fact that China has 6,000 kilometers of high-speed rail that we don't have, just something as simple as that, and the tens of thousands of jobs that could create, that could be sustainable for many, many years to come, is just one example. I'm a huge proponent of nuclear power, and I think that is the only way that you get off of fossil fuels. The only way. Sorry, you can have solar and wind and geothermal and everything in between, but you can't run citywide grids without something tangible like nuclear. Can't do it. So if you want to do it and you don't want coal and natural gas, this is how you do it. Again, I live in reality. And I don't mean that to insult people. We really have to recognize that the reason why there are parties, these dividing lines, is because it makes certain people a lot of money when we're at each other's throats. That's it. Controversy sells. Honesty, not so much.
Yeah, you're right about that, Peter. And man, there's so much in that. Yeah, I'm also a proponent of nuclear energy, and it's one of the most, I think it is the most regulated sector of the economy, is the energy sector. And I think there's only been like 2 nuclear power plants built since the 70s when some of those laws came in. And it's just, you can't make that up. That doesn't benefit anyone, especially at a time when people are looking for energy diversification, trying to make America stronger by not being as dependent on foreign countries, while the United States fights a war to reopen the Strait of Hormuz caused by this war as a direct result of this war. And you said it all about Palantir, man. I try to do whatever I can to expose the madness of that corporation started by In-Q-Tel and the CIA to expand the surveillance state and centralize all of our data and use algorithms to decide, who lives or dies in Gaza. They do this overseas. They're going to take that technology and point it inward if we don't expose this. And it's just so absurd. Their manifesto they released the other day said, hey, we have to have a draft now, saying, hey, we're going to have a lot of wars that would provide a lucrative stream of money to Palantir and the military industrial complex. And they complained in that manifesto, one of the 22 points also, about apps. Apps are the enemy. The iPhone has apps, and that's consuming the American mentality. And what I think, if you read between the lines, that is they don't want to get criticized on social media the more and more people learn about Palantir. So just my thoughts.
I definitely agree. And I also think the reason why nuclear is as controversial as it is because it's not about Chernobyl or Fukushima. It is because it can actually supplant fossil fuels.